Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. President Joe Biden criticized his predecessor for failing to try and stop the deadly January 6th mob attack on the Capitol, saying Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. He made the comments in a pre-recorded speech to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives annual conference in Florida. He remains in isolation at the White House after testing positive for COVID-19 last week.
On January 6th, we relied on law enforcement to save our democracy. We saw what happened. The Capitol Police, the D.C. Metropolitan Police, other law enforcement agencies were attacked and assaulted before our very eyes, speared, sprayed, stomped on, brutalized, and lives were lost. And for 3 hours, the defeated former President of the United States watched it all happen. The brave women and men in blue all across this nation should never forget that. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American.
Biden had previously criticized Trump for helping to incite the deadly Capitol siege, but his comments Monday were the clearest link Biden has made between Trump and the insurrection since a special House committee investigating the attack on the Capitol began holding hearings in June. The former chief of staff to former Vice President Mike Pence has testified before a federal grand jury investigating the deadly assault on the Capitol. That's according to a person familiar with the matter who says Mark Short appeared before the grand jury under subpoena last week. Short was at the Capitol on the day of the siege and was with the vice president as he hid from Trump supporters who had called for his hanging. Former President Trump returns to Washington today for the first time since leaving office to deliver a policy speech tonight before allies who've been crafting an agenda for a second presidential bid. Trump will address the America First Policy Institute's two-day America First Agenda Summit, where his right-wing conservative followers and lawmaker allies will be attending. Pope Francis has apologized for the Catholic Church's cooperation with Canada's catastrophic policy of Indigenous residential schools. The pontiff says the forced assimilation of Native people into Christian society destroyed their cultures, severed their families, and marginalized generations in ways still being felt today. Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls it a cultural genocide. Francis spoke Monday on lands of 4 Cree nations south of Edmonton, Alberta.
I myself wish to reaffirm this with shame and unambiguously humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the Indigenous peoples.
More than 150,000 Native children in Canada were forced to attend government-funded Christian schools from the 19th century until the 1970s in an effort to isolate them from the influence of their culture. Ottawa has admitted physical and sexual abuse was rampant at the schools. Catholic orders operated 66 of the nation's 139 residential schools. European Union governments have agreed to ration natural gas this winter, reducing consumption 15% to protect against further supply cuts by Russia as it pursues its invasion of Ukraine. This comes as Russia's Gazprom says it will reduce supplies to the EU through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline 20% of capacity. That's stoking EU concerns Moscow will use gas trades to challenge European opposition to the war. Here's Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky.
All this is done by Russia on purpose to make it as difficult as possible for Europeans to prepare for winter. And this is an open gas war that Russia is waging against a united Europe. This is precisely how it should be perceived, and they don't care what will happen to the people or how they will suffer, from hunger due to the blockading of ports, or from winter cold and poverty, or from occupation. These are just different forms of terror.
EU energy ministers today announced a draft law meant to lower demand from August through March. If the voluntary measures don't reduce gas use, that will trigger a mandatory reduction across the 27-nation bloc. Russia's space chief says the nation will opt out of the International Space Station after the year 2024 and focus on building its own orbiting outpost. The Biden administration has joined the United Nations and human rights groups in condemning Myanmar's execution of 4 pro-democracy activists, including a former lawmaker Monday. The executions were carried out by the military junta that's taken control of the country. 18 congressional and cabinet agency staff members staged a sit-in at Senate Leader Chuck Schumer's office Monday, demanding he and President Joe Biden take climate action. The group says 6 staffers were arrested. It comes after more than 125 staff members sent 2 letters to Schumer and Biden urging they take ambitious actions to address climate change and the president declare a climate emergency. Vice President Kamala Harris says Indiana's proposed abortion ban reflects a health care crisis in the United States. She met Monday with Democratic state lawmakers on the first day of a contentious special legislative session in Indiana that drew thousands to the state capitol in protest. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.